Thank you, Alyssa, for that introduction. And thanks everyone for being here virtually, either now or in the future when this is recorded and watched again. And you get to see my entire presentation because I was at the end, as one is, but now we get to go to the beginning. And I will begin this presentation with 3 vignettes from different performances in Sierra. In a performance space in Fortaleza, Sierra, in August 2018, there is silence. A Black woman enters and quickly turns down her head. In the continued silence, she lifts her head once again, makes eye contact with several of the observers sitting in a semicircle around her. She remains standing, yet she attempts to hide. Her shoulders crouch forward, her braids dangle in front of her hidden face. As if overcome by a physical or spiritual malady, she covers her face with her hands, her body tenses, and she crouches forward. She screams. The echo. The echo lingers in the air as she looks into her palms. Desperation saturates her stare. What does she see? Perhaps as Oshun, the Orisha or Afro-Brazilian goddess of freshwaters, the young Black woman uses this as a moment of self-reflection, to look within herself, her hands, the mirror of Oshun, and to see her presence as a testament to the violence against and perseverance of Black women. Many generations beforehand, and about 200 kilometers away along the Jaguaribe River, the skeleton of a once forgotten Hachianchi, or drought migrant, becomes flesh. Her being was dragged up from the depths of the flowing Jaguaribe by the net of a lonesome fisherman. In the fisherman's home, she quenches generations of thirst by a single tear shed by the sleeping man. She drinks the tear that has become like a flowing river, able to satiate her insatiable thirst. She then extracts from the fisherman's chest his heart. And in a frenzied dance, she plays the heart of the fisherman like an accordion until her skeleton figure transforms into that of flesh and blood, and she lays down beside the man to rest. The skeleton Hachianchi's story is told, embodied, and recorded along the same shores of the river in summer 2020, where the COVID-19 pandemic persists along memories of drought, misery, and resilience. In October 2018, and within a Fortaleza performance space transformed into a shared universe of drought, a woman hastily works to fill a row of various glasses with water from a large glass jug. The woman crawls back and forth between the glasses, filling the ones left empty as she goes. Once the jar is empty, she must take water already allocated to a particular glass in order to fill the ones that remain empty. The work is not over though, as she then seems to make the effort to equalize the water across the different vessels. As she pours water from one glass to another, precious drops of that fluid fall to the ground. She pays them no mind. Her job is to distribute the water, and the water lost in the process is part of the process. This loss of water mirrors the water losses to evaporation or inefficiency in equipment that are accounted for during transfers from reservoirs in the interior of Sierra to urban areas like Fortaleza. Despite this parallel, the woman's intention to adequately distribute water across different containers contrasts with the realities of water distribution instinct. These moments that embody dynamic socio-natural processes across Sierra, emerge within contexts or histories of dispossession and violence against Indigenous, African, and Afro-Brazilian communities. I honor the Indigenous peoples whose territories span the lands now recognized as the Brazilian state of Sierra. I also recognize that I am presenting on the traditional lands of the Muscogee Creek and Eastern Cherokee peoples, and I show respect for the traditional stewards of these lands and for the land itself. I likewise honor the generations of enslaved persons whose labor built and has maintained current institutions in the United States, Brazil, and globally. Particularly here in Athens, I recognize the enslaved persons whose labor has sustained the University of Georgia, and many of whose remains have been disturbed or continue to be buried on campus. Descendants of these people continue to form an integral part of the Athens community. Anti-Black violence persists in our current institutions, and the disproportionate number of COVID deaths of members of Black communities in Sierra, across Brazil, and in the United States are testaments to the systemic nature of this violence. Colonialism, white supremacy, and other interlocking structures of oppression, as bell hooks and others have observed, continue. and I recognize my own participation in these processes, as well as acknowledge the need to continue to dismantle structures of oppression in order to create more just presents and futures. Today, I am your guide as we travel across Sierra in time and space to look at the ways contemporary performance artists in Sierra confront violently inequitable experiences of drought and water and of death and life. Yet my work depends on many communities of practice and institutional support. And so I would like to first thank my advisor, Dr. Don Nelson, my lab mates, committee members, and research affiliates in Sierra for their continued support. Additionally, I hold much gratitude for my collaborators, teachers, and friends in the performance cosmos in Sierra and other parts of Brazil. My research has also received institutional and financial support from various sources, without which it would not be possible to carry out my work. And I'm truly grateful to everyone in Sierra whom I have met or will meet and with whom I continue to learn. As part of this recognition, I find it important to place myself and recognize my own positionality. So as a white American, Jewish, mostly able-bodied, upper middle class researcher and actor, I acknowledge that the rituals, traditions, and cultural memories of drought and racism in and of performance that I am studying do not form part of my own cultural heritage. However, through my continuing engagement with members of government agencies, universities, charity organizations, performance artists, and others, I continue to develop a type of cultural competency needed to explore the complexities of water relations in Sierra. Part of my ethics includes the development of reciprocity and care through vulnerability, engagement with the communities with which I work, and solidarity with their struggles against oppression. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we will be traversing time and space across Sierra, challenging analytical understandings of how the past, present, and future can be understood. And during this journey, I will first provide some context to understand contemporary inequities or systematic wrongdoings and experiences of drought, recognition, and decision-making processes to understand how a single drought event in Sierra produces a multiplicity of droughts across the state. I'll then explain the usefulness of performance as a lens to better understand inequities in Sierra and how these inequities form part of complex, part social, part natural landscapes across time and space. We'll then explore 3 performance pieces by Sierrense artists that integrate different knowledges from hydrological data to personal lived experiences and social memory in works that confront socio-ecological oppression in Sierra. These works allow for a greater understanding of the relationship among ideas of past, present, and future, and meanings of water, drought, and socio-ecological oppression and inequity. Finally, I'll conclude by situating this presentation in the context of my ongoing dissertation research. Now, as I mentioned, a single drought event, which is often defined as less water than the average or median amount for a year across the state, does not adequately address the lived experiences of communities across the state during a quote unquote drought. So from 2012 to 2018, Sierra experienced one of its worst droughts in recorded history. And during that time, the average rainfall was consistently below the median of 800 millimeters of rainfall. And with that, the entire state was under a state of emergency. Many of the large reservoirs, including the largest reservoir in the state, the Castañao, were operating at minimal capacities, so 5%. However, places like Fortaleza, the capital, which is on the coast, had a different experience of drought in general because of how water is allocated across the state. And so even though the Castañao, that large reservoir, was operating at a very low capacity, water was guaranteed to Fortaleza in order to avoid having to do rationing or so that the population wouldn't notice the lack of rainfall. However, in other areas of the state, along the Jaguaribe River, for example, communities were left without water because of these allocation processes and needed to wait for carro pipas or water trucks to deliver water, which was and continues to be undependable sometimes and requires people to make decisions about whether they will cook food or take a bath. And those inequities span across time as well as space. And so in major disparities in how communities in the Sertão or the hinterlands have experienced drought. For example, the Great Drought in the late 19th century, drought migrants fleeing the arid conditions and lack of water in the interior state fled to Fortaleza, where they were met either to put, they were met and not able to receive the help that they really needed, whereas the wealthier or more industrial populations in Fortaleza had very disparate experiences of that drought. So this is an integrative conservation program, and so we get to use lots of different lenses or ways of understanding the world around us. One of the ways that I am studying drought and water in Sierra is through performance. And so performance brings attention to the way that embodied practices are a way of storing and transmitting cultural knowledge and identity. So Diana Taylor, a performance art scholar, argues that performances leave traces that provide insight into cultural imaginaries. And these are archives, which can be books, maps, records, buildings, ruins, and supposedly quote unquote permanent traces, and also the repertoire, which are acts of embodied knowledge that are typically thought of as ephemeral or non-reproducible. So performances, like in a play or a film, may reproduce, contest, or reactivate cultural memory, knowledge, and identity. And so important to how I understand water and drought is the idea that drought is part of socio-ecological relations, which are not just the rainfall averages, for example, but drought is also very social and depends on how different groups of people interact and have access to resources, are able to participate in processes, and are seen by institutions. The past, present, and future, and the contestation of the analytical differences between these is very important in performance, as the present moment brings traces from the past and also allows to create and imagine new futures. And all of these coalesce in moments that cannot be completely distinguished. And in this particular case, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the integrativeness and experimental in 3 different performances. So in Corpo Fechado para Balanço, which is a dance performance by Leah Ramos and Paulo Lima, Leah's presence as a Black woman is a testament to the presence and existence of Black people in Sierra, where only about 4% of the population considers themselves preto or Black. And in her performance, she takes the rituals of enslaved peoples, the corpo fechado, in order to bring a contemporary critique to anti-Black violence in Brazil, and particularly against Black women. Part of this is basing off of Afro-Brazilian religions, and then also her contemporary training and traditional training in jazz, ballet, and other forms of dance. So through this performance, she integrates different knowledges, including the Afro-Brazilian dance traditions, her contemporary training, her presence and experiences as a Black woman to contest structural oppression and violence against Black people. In Ahachiranchi, which is a short film by Debra Ingrigi and Chico Oliveira, the story is told of a skeleton Hachiranchi or drought migrant, and through the use of puppetry, lived experience again, storytelling, dance, and song, all integrating different languages or ways of doing performance, the struggles and yet persistence of populations in the Sertão who are often forgotten when conversations about water allocation are made present and are in the forefront. And Deborah and Chico and the others who were in the film production all are from these regions and really find that the production itself holds a lot of themselves while also questioning what is real and what is fantastic in the experiences of being from the Sertão. And finally, in Dramaturgias da Água de Seca, the artists take moments, and I think that I am almost out of time. So they take moments and have integrated hydrological research with meeting with climate specialists and also traditional puppetry and different knowledges in order to create a drought universe and tell the stories of how socio and ecological disparities have persisted across time, also incorporating sources like a novel by Carachel G. Queiroz, O 15, which examines the lived experience of the 1915 drought as a novel, or a fictional novel. And through these different performances, we can see that misery, fragility, spirituality, and strength all permeate experiences of oppression in the contestation of oppressive structures. Finally, this is all part of ongoing work that's related to one of my dissertation chapters on performance. And in order to improve what I am saying, I need to do more research on the legacies of enslavement in Sierra to understand how Black bodies and where they are, primarily where Black communities are, primarily in the peripheries, is impacted by or has been impacted by drought and impacts the ways that water relations exist today. And part of this is a collaboration with Pavilhão da Magnolia to produce the second part of their project. And with that, I thank you all, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. Maybe.
Thank you for that beautiful talk, Cydney. So probably just take one question. David has a question saying, incredible talk. Oh, I think you just addressed his question, so we're good on that end. But if anyone has another question, we can take one more before we wrap it up.
Okay, so I will take up the challenge to how do I see water inequity manifest itself in the body? So there's actually a lot of research more in the biological anthropology sphere of water insecurity and disparities in how lack of access to water of adequate quality and quantity really impacts people's lived well-being, physical well-being. And in addition to those systematic studies of particularly water and quantities of water, so migration patterns, I think, and where people are situated and who's situated where can be part of understanding how inequity is situated in the body. And so groups in the Sertão or the hinterlands may not consider themselves, for example, pretos or blacks, yet or black people, sorry, when in the novel O 15 by Rachel de Queiroz, one of those people refers to migrants. So a person from the Sertão refers to migrants in the Sertão, so people who are slightly less socioeconomically lower on that socioeconomical hierarchy as Black people. And so it's the perception of who is what and how the idea of Blackness then becomes associated with poverty and misery and results in measurable inequities of Black communities who live in the peripheries or who aren't recognized as such in the hinterlands is an example of this systematic wrongdoing, which means that it's morally arbitrary why people have different experiences and why people benefit and why people suffer from different relations. That was sort of rambly, sorry.
It was a very broad, open-ended question, so thank you for a fascinating talk. It was great.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much to the speakers today. And as we wrap up, if you do want to continue the conversation or have more questions for the speakers, definitely get in contact with them. If you're comfortable, speakers, you can throw your email into the chat and people can follow up with you. Otherwise, thank you so much, Cydney, Katie, and Jeff, for your talks today. They were very wonderful, very informative, very engaging. And thank you to everyone participating in SIC today. Remember that